And at this stage, what matters is the requirements could be in any state that could come into inputs. You've got the information management approach, the solution scope. All of these are going to give you the inputs into this particular activity here. And once we have these, we are in a position to define the requirements architecture. And then obviously after this, you'll have the requirements architecture in place, the architecture management software. There are a lot of different softwares out there, like Rational Requisite Pro. There's Archimate. There are so many, and from the Microsoft point of view, there is the Microsoft Team Foundation, TFS. TFS is basically Team Foundation Server, and then you've got Visual Studio, and an integration with, for example, Trello. They've got a lot of agile tools to do with, like Jira, for example. All of those would give you the platform and the tooling for you to be able to achieve this requirement architecture, and also the obviously the supported ably by the regulatory information, the legal and the compliance information from the respective regulatory bodies like the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, Financial Conduct Authority. All of these would actually provide you the backbone to do that. And once we had these, then we can come up with a short list of methodologies, the frameworks, and how we're going to progress further into the next stages of the solution space. So what would involve, what kind of task would be using this output? So we've got prioritization of requirements, definitely would kind of take this as an input. They would try and they would also use the specification model requirements is another task that could use the architecture, requirement architecture as a kind of supporting input. Assess requirement changes. Whenever there is some requirement change requests happening, on what basis would you do that? You would actually again check it on the basis of the architecture requirements. Is it functional? Is it non-functional? Is it general technical requirement? So you should be able to take a call, make your decision based on the architecture of the requirements. And then the definition of the design options. What could potentially be the design, and how we can go about working on the designs, and next to the lower level of definition of the design components and services and microservices. So if you really look at it in the context of the overall requirement architecture, look at it as in this context of, for example, this is how in the good old traditional waterfall ways of working, we've got the FRS, BRD, SRS. We were just discussing this in the last activity as well. So we used to write loads of pages of documents, text documents, maybe one or two diagrams somewhere. We used to have charts, tables, all of those we used to do. But then so bulky, the requirements used to be like 300, 400, 500 page documents. And how much of it really is read by the team or even by the reviewing stakeholder is a big question mark, was it a big question mark. So, and then obviously now the shift has moved to the agile development, agile ways of working has progressed. And now we've got requirements in not just those documents, but requirements nowadays are in different formats. You've got user stories, obviously, as a starting point. And then for each user story, you would have the acceptance test cases written in the form of Gherkin statements. We discussed this, like the given, when, and then. And then we also are creating some kind of wireframes, sketches, mock-ups, models, personas, prototypes, demos, all of these. So there is not one form or shape that the requirement is captured in now. It's not just a monolith or a uniform way of doing things. It's now in blended ways that you're trying to create the requirements in multiple formats, multiple channels, multiple ways of delivering them. And that's the beauty with the requirement architecture. So here the goal is to ensure that the requirements support each other. So they need to have some kind of support in terms of supporting each other in a way that is complementing. It's not really fighting with each other. Technical requirement is not an opposite of a business requirement. It is actually trying to support how you can achieve your business requirement. So that's how you should try and see. It's not supplementing, it's complementing. Similarly, an infrastructure requirement or a security requirement is not conflicting with the a user requirement or usability requirement. It is actually trying to complement it in a way that both of them can coexist and they're supporting each other in delivering your end solution. That's how you should try and look at the requirements architecture as. So in terms of how you do this, you would need to actually make sure that you have a proper structure in place. You have to have some kind of a hierarchy or formation of requirements in a way, okay, this is a functional requirements, these are non-functional requirements. So on what basis would you be able to do that? This is a business objective, this is a business requirement, and this one is a technical requirement. So on what basis would you be able to say that this is what you need to, we'll discuss that in the next slide. So this is basically a kind of a view of the different types or different ways of how you can define the requirements. So here in the center, you've got requirements, and then you've got perhaps on a very broad level, on a broader scale, you've got two main different types of requirement, I can say. One is a business requirement, the other one is a solution requirement. And then you've got general requirements, technical requirements, functional, non-functional requirements. So it's not, there is that sense of, okay, this requirement is of this type, and then you can actually try and perhaps involve the right SME, the domain subject matter expert, or the business architect. For example, if it's a business requirement, if it's a technical requirement, you can involve the technical architect and get that, or even developer. So there is that sense of categorization, which would really help you to seek the support and to make it in a way that it is actually fulfilling its purpose, why that particular requirement is written the way it is. And as BAs, what do we need to do? It's very important that we address this requirements architecture activity in terms of the different definitions and categorizations of requirements, as what we just saw, functional, non-functional. We can use verbs plus model. There are different ways. So the requirements, the viewpoints, views, all of these need to be addressed. The perspectives, all of these need to be put in: technical perspective, operational perspective, infrastructure, business perspective, customer perspective. Each of these has got a different way of looking at things. It could be the same thing, but it's like that elephant with five, I should not say blind, but yeah, visually challenged people. When they actually look at the elephant and they feel each part of the elephant, they describe the elephant as the person who is feeling the legs of the elephant felt that it's really a very strong column type thing. They think that it is actually, the elephant is nothing but a column, a big, huge column, iron column. Whereas a person who is feeling the ear of the elephant feels that it's one huge, one huge, set of what we call a skin of the elephant. He or she feels that it is huge, the surface there. They don't see anything beyond that. The person who feels the trunk feels that it is. So each one of it is different. Each one of each one of the stakeholders feels and looks at the same system, same product from different perspective based on their own observations, their own experiences, their own expectations. So it's important that we as BAs need to stitch through these different threads, different perspectives, and we should be able to actually, all the way from the business, the product, the technology, the marketing, the customer, the operations, infrastructure, we should be able to stitch together and blend these different perspectives and bring forward that kind of unified vision. And for that, what needs to be done is, obviously we need to look at the overall industry, what sector, what market, which organization, what standards we have, what compliance requirements, what regulatory stuff. And we should be able to come up with the set of standards that adhere to these requirements. And then what are the levels of completeness? Is it understandable? Again, these are going back to the verification, right? So is it simple enough that anybody can understand? Is it complete enough that it is conveying the full story? Is it giving precise? Is it accurate? Is it precise? Is it correct? Is it current? All of those set of parameters that we discussed. And then we need to make sure that is as unambiguous, consistent, blah, 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 right? So it's all verified. And then once this is all in place, once we have got this kind of go ahead, then that means that we have got that overall information architecture for the business analysis. So we have got the kind of placeholder perspective in terms of where does that requirement go. It's complete, it's correct, it's all good in terms of the quality of the requirements. We have also got a validation of the requirement that's prioritized, and also the fact that we have got in terms of which specific type or a category of that requirement it is. So we can then start doing this solutionizing later. So what kind of stakeholders are you trying to involve here in this case of definition of requirements architecture? Again, we involve the domain SME, very important for the problem definition and the identification, understanding the problem. End user, same. I mean, it's all of these stakeholders really contribute and deliver value from their own perspective. Testers. So it's really important that we keep the engagement with these different stakeholders intact, and then we keep delivering the value coming out from these interactions with the stakeholders. And when it comes to the different techniques that we try and use within the definition of requirements architecture activity, we start with the data modeling here. So by this time, we're now getting to a stage we have a fair bit of idea about the requirements, the problems, the opportunities, the domain, and potentially how the solution could be looking like and how it should feel like. So with that in mind, we can start the conceptual data model. This is not physical data model. This is the conceptual data model. So you start off with identifying the entities that are there in the picture, how they're connected, how they're related to each other, relationships, the multiplicity, one-to-one, one-to-many. So that kind of a conceptual overview of the data entities is something that you can get started at this stage. So that actually can be a good, this is a good time for us to get started with the data model, conceptual data modeling. Functional decomposition, very important, because we have gotten to a stage, as we said, we are in the midway into in the journey between the problem space and the solution space. So we now have got a fair bit of idea where we stand with respect to the overall architecture in terms of the high level. And then we are going to break it down further into different components, different modules, and from there with respect to the different parts, different tasks, activities, and all that. So functional decomposition more from the functionality would really help us put the requirement in the right place where it should belong to. And the interviews are a great way again to kind of reassert our understanding and make sure that we have got the requirements right, the architecture right, and it is aligned to the business. Again, these are some of the techniques that would really help you meet the original objective, why we set out this initiative, why we started this product or the project in the first place. So this is kind of reiteration of that sense of purpose and whether we are aligned to that purpose or not. Organizational modeling would really help in this place as well, because we have got this business analyst and the business architect, the technical architect and the developers. We've got people slowly coming in, the testers coming into the team, trying to look at the test cases, write the test cases. So we've got pretty much more and more different roles of people who are starting to contribute in the process of this product development. So we can have a better picture in terms of the roles and the responsibilities when we do the organizational modeling. We can also conduct workshops at this stage, because we can now include all the stakeholders who are in a position to look at our requirements, what we have written so far, what we have accomplished so far, and they can actually kind of say yes. They can give us inputs, their insights, the prioritization, the verification, validation. And that's the reason why we should get the people into workshops and have this walkthroughs, as we discussed before. Very important. And the scope modeling really helps, because now is the time for us to say, yes, this is the final solution scope. This is how it would look like. This is how we're going to interact with this system versus something else. And this is a set of other applications, products, features, users that are outside our scope of application under development. And how those interact with us is what we can try and define in this scope modeling. So very, very important for us to accomplish here.